While the offering was going on, Pastor was asking me, "Are you next?" And I was asking him, "Am I next?" We changed the order so much from what that paper said, neither of us knew what was supposed to be next. Told him, I was like, I don't really care one way or another as long as I know if I'm the one that's next. Joshua chapter 1, starting in verse 1, it says, "Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I will give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of a good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest." Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Lord, I pray that you will use this message this evening, Lord. I pray that you will speak to us through it, Lord. You know that I don't want my inabilities to get in the way of the message that you have for us this evening, Lord. I pray that you will just use me tonight, Lord, to be your messenger, your mouthpiece this evening, Lord. I pray this in your name. Amen. You can go ahead and be seated. The title of tonight's message is simply this: the choice to continue. The choice to continue. The passage that we read to start off with really, I considered reading before this, but it was going to be awkward then trying to transition into a new book. But it gives us where we are at for the children of Israel and for Joshua. For the last 40 plus years, their leader has been Moses. And while the children of Israel many times complained about Moses, and while there were a lot of things about Moses that they didn't like, he was still their leader that they had known since they left Egypt. They complained about his leading them in the wilderness, and at times they complained thinking that he had just led them out there to die, and they complained about the way that he led, but he was their leader nonetheless. And especially at this point in the beginning of the book of Joshua, if you remember, the children of Israel came to the edge of the promised land, and because of the evil report of the 10 spies, they chose not to go in, and for their punishment was that God wouldn't allow them in the land. So these that are alive in Joshua chapter 1, when Moses dies and Joshua steps in as the new leader, these are the young ones who were young enough that Moses has been probably the only leader they've ever known. So very simply put, this transition is going to be a hard thing. This is going to be a difficult thing when this is the only leader that you've ever known, and all of a sudden he's gone. Someone else is running this. Anytime you have a transition of power, it's hard. And it really doesn't matter what realm you're talking about. If you're looking in the political realm, when a transition of power happens in the political realm, it causes all sorts of unrest. There's always the question of how will this new leader lead? Wasn't that long ago that was happening in, I believe it was China, that there was all sorts of question. New leader, how are they going to lead? what changes will they make, and those sorts of questions. And often, even if you didn't like the leader that was in place before, you don't like the transition, because that can be a hard thing. We see it in the political realm. We see it in the workforce. I can give a couple of examples here. When I was 17, I got a job working for Les Schwab. I was determined to work there, and when I applied, they told me you can't work here until you're 18, and my dad taught me to be persistent. So I went every day, and every single day walked into the manager's office and asked for a job, and actually told him at one point, because he mentioned me being persistent, I told him, I'm going to keep coming until either you hire me or give me a restraining order, one or the other. So he hired me, and he and I got along really well. He had been with Les Schwab for like 25, 30 years, but on hiring me, I mean, this was my first day, on hiring me, he told me, Les, the owner of Les Schwab, is getting old and handing things over to his kids, and his words were, the leadership is changing, don't stay long. A company that he had worked for 3 decades, but now leadership was changing, and he knew that's going to be a hard thing. It's going to be difficult. I see it I'll use another example of mine in the plumbing realm. You know, every plumbing company around here is trying to hire experienced plumbers, but they can't be found. So here's what happens. Anytime a company in the area starts to consider a leadership change, managerial ownership, whatever, the rumor gets out and every other company starts to advertise to their employees. Because everyone knows that leadership changes are hard. And anytime you have them, people get uneasy. Even if they didn't like the last manager or owner, a new manager comes with unknown. And that's what's happening to the children of Israel here. Moses, whether they loved him or whether they hated him, Moses had been leading them for 40 plus years, and now this change is going to be hard. This is going to be difficult. I don't tonight want to, with the message, I'm going to try not to focus on the leadership aspect of it as much as the hardship aspect of it, because there's no debating this transition that they are about to go through won't be easy. At the same time that they change their leader, they also change their direction. They immediately go from wandering aimlessly in the desert under Moses to charging the promised land under Joshua. This is going to be hard. This is going to be a super difficult thing. And as humans, our natural reaction when something is hard, our natural reaction is stop. And often specifically to sit down. An example, exercise. Experts say, who they are I don't know, but experts say after a strenuous workout, the worst thing you can do is sit down. I read an article this week that was in reference to that. It said, when you sit or lie down after a workout, it is the equivalent of your body hitting a brick wall going at high speeds. And the reason was your body doesn't know the difference between fight or flight and exercise. And all of a sudden, you take it from fight or flight mode to nothing. And yet, after a workout, I would assume most of us in here have heard something along those lines before. And yet, after a workout, that's exactly what we all want to do. We're tired. Josh has been running a bunch lately, and I watched Josh on Tuesday, ran 7 miles, walked in the front door, and plopped on the couch. Because after something hard, that's our natural reaction. I'm tired, so I sit. I will make this disclaimer. I watched him because I wasn't going to run 7 miles with a kid. That's crazy. But that's our natural reaction. That's hard, so I sit. You work a hard day, same thing. If you've worked a hard physical day, the thought in your head is, I'm tired, I've been working hard all day, I just want to sit here and relax. But sitting to relax makes it worse. The muscles get tighter, the pain gets worse. And I know those are both physical examples, But the principle applies all over. We face something hard, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual. Our natural reaction is to stop, to sit down, which is the opposite of what we need to be doing. Notice what God tells Joshua in verse 2. Moses has just died. Verse 2, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise. Go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto a land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. God doesn't tell Joshua, Moses, my servant, is dead. Why don't you sit here and mourn a while? Moses, my servant, is dead, and I understand, Joshua, the stress that puts you under, and I know the hardship that this is for you. So why don't you sit down here and kind of try and wrap your head around this for a while? No, this hardship comes, and he tells Joshua, arise, keep going. Get up and keep going, because the reality is this: hardship or not, leadership change or not, their work had just begun. There was still work to do. This was no time to sit down and mope about how life isn't fair and how this is going to be hard without Moses. Let me just give or use this as a quick transition, because we all face hardships. Like I said, I'm not really going to focus on the leadership change as much as the fact that this was a hardship for them. But we all face hardships, and I know the natural reaction is to stop, to sit down, because you're tired and it's hard. But as a child of God, that's the last thing we need to be doing. When we face a hardship, it's time to stand up and keep going. The reality is our work is nowhere near done. There are lost that still need Christ. There is still darkness that needs light. But staying true to our series, that's a choice. When you face a hardship, whatever that may be, you have a choice of, am I going to sit down and stop, or am I going to stand up and keep going? Because what's natural is to sit down. You finish that 7-mile run, everything in your body says sit down. It's a choice instead to stretch and cool down. You deal with something hard all day at work. The natural reaction is to shut your brain down and give up. You face some spiritual hardship, and the natural reaction is to give up, to stop. You have to choose to rise up. You have to choose to keep going. Now here's where the message kind of begins this evening. When you make the choice to rise up, to stand and continue through hardship, God tells Joshua here, I'll do 4 things for you. The first, God says, when you stand or rise in hardship and continue, I'll guide you. I'll guide you. Look at verse 3. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses. This concept of God giving them everywhere the sole of their foot touches. And we'll get into the battles and that side of it in just a minute. But let's just look at this. God is guiding where Joshua's foot will land. God didn't tell Moses that when he was wandering the desert. This is the same promise that he gave Moses about the promised land, but God didn't give them all the ground that their foot touched in the wilderness. Why not? Because the wilderness wasn't where God intended for their feet to be. It wasn't where God was guiding them. He wanted them to enter the promised land 40 years previous to that. It was their choice that sent them wandering into the wilderness. It was their choice that sent them out of God's will. But when you continue when you can choose to continue through the hardship, God guides your steps. There are countless passages in the Bible referring to the way that God guides us, or the way that God leads us. But a common one, I think that one that fits this well is one that we know well. Psalm 23, 3 and 4. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I don't think it's a coincidence that the psalmist talks about that God will lead me in the paths of righteousness and walking through the valley of the shadow of death right by each other. I don't think there's coincidences in my Bible. So I don't think it's any coincidence that he says God's going to lead me in the paths of righteousness, yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death. Because sometimes where God leads brings you through hardships. Sometimes where God leads brings you through difficulties. Follow me here, though. If you'll keep walking, he'll keep leading you through. If you'll keep walking, if you'll keep following him, he'll keep leading you through, he'll keep guiding you through it. But I'm afraid a lot of times we never see again, Psalm 23, we never see the green pastures, we never see the still waters because we hit that point of walking through the valley and we lay down and cry. We don't rise up and continue, so God can never lead us. There's no time that we need the hand of God leading us more than through the hard time. God tells Joshua, arise, continue. Despite what's going on around you, arise, continue, and I'll guide you. Tells him, number 2, arise, continue, and I'll be with you. Look at verse 5 with me. He says, there shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. Verse 9, have not I commanded thee, be strong and of a good courage, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. Why? For the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest. Twice in those couple of verses reminds him, just like I was with Moses, I'm going to be with you. When standing to continue, there is very little more helpful than someone standing next to you. When you're standing and you're in a hardship and you know I need to stand and I need to continue, there is nothing more helpful than someone next to you. You think in battle, how many times troops were pinned down and doing all they could just to survive, but then reinforcements came and turned the battle around. As I was studying for this, I thought of examples for both. The Alamo, I know super well known, although they don't teach history in schools anymore, so maybe not as well known, but I'm just going to assume you know about it. Soldiers pinned down by the Mexican army and hung on as long as they could for the hope of help coming. They sent for it. They knew they were outmanned. They knew they were outgunned and completely trapped. But the help never came, and though they held on as long as they could and fought as hard as they could, with no man to stand beside them, no help to come, they eventually fell. On the other side, the Revolutionary War. You look at the colonists were hopelessly overmatched. Nothing militarily said that they had a chance. The British had better guns, better training, better supplies, but the colonists had hope of the French coming to their aid and continued to fight, just trying to hold out long enough until hope could arrive. I read an article this week that some historians say when they arrived was on the brink of too late, but turned the tables of the war. Reinforcements, someone to stand next to you, can make all the difference. Spiritually, it's no different. It's one of the huge factors of being in a church family. That standing in this world can be exhausting. You understand this. Being a light where you are can be a very difficult thing because there's times you feel like you're the only one. Sometimes you feel like you're the only one. I've had jobs that I was the only one working there who claimed any sort of Christianity, and I've told all these stories before. I won't again right now, but times where I felt completely alone, but I knew, though they may not be on the job site with me, I had a church family standing with me. But better than that, Because the help that we get is more than just the support and help from other believers. God isn't telling Joshua, be strong, be of good cheer, because the people will be with you. It's not what he says. He doesn't tell him, be strong and of a good cheer, because they're going to follow you. No, he tells them, be strong and how does he put it? Be strong and very courageous, or of good courage, because I'll be with thee. Because I'll be with thee. Sounds a lot to me like Hebrews 13:5. Where we're told God will never leave thee nor forsake thee. So it doesn't matter where I'm standing. I'm never standing alone, because he'll be with me. You notice in these passages how many times he told Joshua to be strong? I mean, it is over and over in these first 9 verses. I think in part because this is a terrifying thing for Joshua. But over and over he tells him, be strong. It's because he's the one giving Joshua strength. The strength to rise and continue comes from God being with you. We saw that in verse 9. Have not I commanded thee, be strong and of a good courage, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. That's where that strength to stand and continue comes from, is that he's with you. God tells Joshua, arise and continue and I'll guide you. Arise and continue and I'll be with you. The third thing, arise and continue and I'll fight for you. Look at verse 5 again. There we go. Verse 5. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so will I be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Remember the circumstances that they're in. They're about to walk into the promised land. I know that it's often referred to as that, but I've said this in messages before. The land they're walking into is inhabited. And the people who live there aren't just going to hand it over. Oh, God promised you this land, here you go. No, word has come around and what you are there for, and they're not happy about it, and they're going to fight to defend their homes, because that's what this was. And don't forget, the people who lived in this land are the same people that 40 years ago their fathers were too afraid to fight. Joshua himself, being one of the 12 spies, he came out with a good report, we know, knowing what God could do, but that also means that those giants that they all saw, he saw with his own eyes. The walled cities, he saw those. And let me tell you, it's really easy when someone else is the leader to say, yeah, it's going to be hard, but you can do it. It's really hard when you're the leader to say, yeah, it's going to be hard, but I can lead you. 40 years ago, he was coming out saying, Moses, this is going to be tough, but we can do this, and I'm backing you now. This is going to be tough, and they're backing me. He saw for himself those giants and the walled cities. This was not going to be an easy thing, and they knew it. But God assures Joshua that it didn't matter how strong the cities are, and it didn't matter how big the giants are. I'll fight for you. Says that no one will be able to stand against him, and he proved it. More than just saying it, he proved it time and time again. Impossible battles, and they won. I don't care how many times we read about it, we think about it, talk about it, preach about it. Jericho, you cannot make sense of how it worked. There's no military way that works. They were out-defensed, out-weaponed, they were outmanned. It shouldn't have worked. There's no physical way that worked. There's no way that walking around a city every day and then the last day walk around the city and yell that walls fall down and the people all kill themselves running away from you. I tend to be I like to try and think things out, try and make sense of things. There's no way to make sense of that in our human minds other than this. God said he would fight for them, and he did. Not only did he say no one's going to be able to stand before thee, but he backed it. He proved it. Because they got up and continued on God fought for them. You know, the same is true for you and I. I know at times God used the children of Israel physically swinging their swords. But God fought for them in miraculous ways over and over and over. We often get this mindset that I need to stand up and fight for what's right. And follow me here, I don't think that's right. You look at the armor of God. The armor of God, we're told to put it on and having done all to stand. It doesn't say, put this all on and having done all to fight. I think very often we get ourselves into fights that God intended to fight for us. How often in the Bible do we see God saying things along the lines of, ye shall hold your peace and I will fight for you, or things like that where we aren't to be the ones fighting, we're just to stand and He does it. But I think very often we get ourselves into fights that God intended to fight for us. Here's what I'm trying to portray here, that if we rise up and continue in God's will, God's way, God will fight for you. Rise up and continue. God says, if you rise up and continue, I'll guide, I'll be with you, I'll fight for you. And then lastly, this evening, rise up and continue, and I'll make you prosper. Look at verse 7 and 8 with me. It says, only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt, there we go, I was missing a word, thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. I feel like I'm repeating myself a little here, but I want to make this abundantly clear. Prosper doesn't mean I'll make you rich, doesn't mean you'll face no battles, doesn't mean you'll face no struggles along the way. Because they certainly had all of that. Children of Israel, from this point on, God says, I will make your way prosperous. They faced countless battles along the way. I'm sure in this series we'll look specifically at some of them. If we kind of continue on where I believe God's leading me with this, we'll look at some of them. But they faced a ton of them, a ton of battles, as they quite literally went area by area taking the promised land. They faced battles. They faced all sorts of struggles, times that they decided, well, we don't need God, and tried to take the promised land themselves and stumbled and fell. They got done with the battle at Jericho and started thinking, well, we just marched and yelled and people killed themselves trying to get away. We're pretty big and bad, so, we'll go over this next little city and we don't even need God's help, and got humbled. Times they forgot to seek God and got duped by a neighboring city. They faced struggles. God saying, I'm going to make your way prosperous, was not God telling them, if you'll get up and continue on and follow me, you'll be living on easy street from here on out. But rather it is this, continuing. I'm going to change how I have it in my notes here. Before this moment where they rose up and continued, their life was a life of aimlessly walking in circles in the wilderness until the day you die. And now they lived a life of purpose, walking in God's will. Christian, you make the choice to rise and continue, God is going to make your way prosper. Just like the children of Israel, you'll face times of struggle. Wouldn't it be nice if the day that you were saved, God just made it so that you never had a struggle again? I mean, wouldn't that be a nice thing? The day you got saved, that everything from then on went exactly how you planned it. But he didn't do that. You still live in a fallen world, and you still have a sin nature. You'll struggle. Just like the children of Israel, you'll face battles. I just said that. We live in a fallen world, and if you are living for God, it's not a question of if you will face battles, but when is the next one. The world doesn't like the things that we stand for and doesn't like the things that we believe, and no matter how non-confrontational you may be, you will face battles. I'm not saying that you won't have struggles and fights, but you'll be prosperous. Well, what does that mean? If it doesn't mean money and it doesn't mean ease, what is it? I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm not going to take a bunch of time going into this right now, but a prosperous Christian life, I think, can be boiled down to this. It is a life of purpose, fruit, and heavenly rewards. And really, what more do we need? What more do we need? Other than a life of purpose, fruit, and heavenly rewards. The children of Israel are facing hardship. Their leadership is changing. Their direction is changing. And they have a decision to make. Do we sit here and complain about our problem, about this difficulty? Or do we rise up and move forward? And God tells them, if you'll rise up and continue on, I'll be with you, I'll guide you, I'll fight for you, and I'll make you prosper. For those of us here, we are facing some hard times. Hard times with our nation, with the different things going on. I am still kind of taken back by a conversation that I had earlier today that I thought sounded so absurd it must not be true. And then my dad confirmed to me it was true, that apparently our state is doing some goofy thing where if you get your COVID shot, they'll give you marijuana. Like, it's a trade-off. I mean, we are facing ridiculous hardships in our nation. Some may be facing hard times with loved ones. Some may be facing hard times financially, or some may be facing hard times spiritually. And your natural reaction and mine is, this is hard, I'm tired, I'm going to sit down and quit. It's just our natural reaction. But there's work still to be done. There's work still to be done. There are lost still to reach. There are our neighbors and family and coworkers and friends and many others who are still lost. And if you'll make the choice, it's hard, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to stand up and continue. God will be there. God will guide. God will fight for you, and you'll have a life of purpose, fruit, and heavenly rewards. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that you will, Lord, help us to be able to grasp on this. I understand, Lord, we all face hardships of varying degree. We can look at the things, as I said, the hardships in our nation right now, but I think often there's probably people that are here tonight that are facing personal hardships that we don't even know about. We're unaware of, and so often our response to a hardship, it's natural, is I'm tired, I'm just going to sit down and stop. But there's still work to be done. Just like it was with Joshua and the children of Israel, there's still a lot of work to be done. It's not time to sit down and stop. It's time to rise up and continue on. It's time to rise up and push forward. And I think we can see pretty clearly that if we make that decision, Lord, I'm not going to sit down and stop. I'm going to stand up and keep moving forward, that you'll be there. You'll guide our step. You'll fight for us. And you'll give us a prosperous life. I pray this in your name. Amen.